The Backyard Naturalists podcast is presented by Backyard Birds in Matthews, North Carolina. Backyard Birds offers a unique in-store shopping experience highlighting the joy and excitement of attracting wildlife with the finest quality seed and the best quality bird feeders, bird houses, bird baths, and more. Bringing people of all ages together with nature and wildlife, Backyard Birds has everything you need to create your own backyard natural habitat. Connect with Backyard Birds at thebirdfoodstore.com or on social media. Now, here's Debbie and Laurie, the Backyard Naturalists.
Welcome to the Backyard Naturalist, the podcast about anything and everything related to nature. We appreciate you joining us as always. This episode is one of what we call our short episodes, and it's just me and Laurie talking about a very limited specific topic. So I'm calling this one Tiny Houses, Tiny Habitats. You know, if you go to some of the home improvement shows, they have a lot on tiny houses, little tiny square footage houses, but they've got a variety of things in them, and some of them are quite nice. And I thought, we could draw a parallel by talking about tiny habitats. We don't live on farms or on a 2-acre lot, or if we live in an apartment, a townhome, a condo, okay, our space might be limited for habitats, but that does not mean it can't be done. Right. So we're going to walk through the requirements of wildlife habitats and talk about the options for putting these in tiny habitats.
Because the wildlife has learned to coexist with us, and they accept that very well.
Exactly. Yep. We are living nose to beak with wildlife in our yards now. So we might as well start to enrich their habitats and give them some support. First thing we're going to talk about is places to raise young. And I'm going to let Laurie kick it off with birdhouses.
So little birdhouses hanging or even on a building, if you have an outbuilding or something, would be for wrens and chickadees, house wrens, house finches.
Yep.
Those are good. Those are all good ones.
And these are little bitty houses. They're maybe 4 inches, 5 inches tall. Yep. They are not tall at all. So it's really easy to accommodate those.
You can hang them, or you can you can hang them from a little pole or something. Actually, one was hanging from my boxing on the back of my house when the wren did it. He liked that one. So,
I'd be willing to bet with a Carolina wren, you could just stick it on a deck rail and they'd build on it overnight before you even knew there was anybody in there. So those are some good things you can do with houses. But there are other places that sometimes birds will build nests and raise their young. For example, hanging baskets. I can't talk about how many people have called me and said, "Oh no, I just watered a bird. It was in a hanging basket and I didn't know it was there. Did I kill it? Is it going to leave?" And I'm like, no and no. So they'll be fine. Yeah. You might want to watch where you water from now on until they've raised those young. Just water on the edge or whatever, but they'll be fine. They're there because they felt that it was safe to build there. And the same for planters. The hanging baskets are usually up higher. Planters are down lower. But that works as well for them.
And wreaths on a door. House finch. Oh, it seems like always a house finch will grab a wreath.
Yeah, and Carolina wrens, and I've heard of mourning doves, and cardinals will put it. And I've heard of people saying, "Can I use my door?" Sure. It's probably not going to scare it off. If you have another option, go around back if you want to, but I don't think it's going to be a big deal. And then the final category for this place to raise young in a tiny habitat would be a dead tree or a snag that you have in your yard, because those are really beneficial to wildlife. Our cavity nesters aren't going to nest in a tiny little birdhouse, but they will excavate a hole in, say, a dead dogwood tree, for example.
Downy woodpeckers, those would be good ones.
Absolutely. So those are places that you can fulfill the place to raise young category in how to create a wildlife habitat. Let's move to food. And since we're talking tiny habitats, we probably need to keep it simple for food. So give them some examples of what we mean by that.
Something without shells would be good. Usually a lot of people with a small yard don't want the mess.
Right.
A lot of HOAs don't want the mess.
Right.
So sunflower hearts without the shells or sunflower chips.
Those. In addition to not having the shells, what's the benefit of feeding those two foods?
Besides being high in protein, every bird in this area, in the Carolinas can eat that, and they do eat it. The goldfinches will eat it, all the way up to woodpeckers.
Yep.
They all eat it. So you attract every kind of bird without the mess.
Right. And it's easy and simple. You get one feeder, make sure that the port is the right size for that particular food, and we're done. You can also feed nectar, and I think a lot of people love hummingbirds. And hummingbirds don't have some of the same problems associated with them. And I'd put problems in quotes. I wouldn't consider any of them to be a problem. It's just part of living with nature. But there's not going to be a mess from a nectar feeder, for example, that doesn't slop over and spill on the ground. You're not going to attract pests, most likely. And we know that our hummingbirds love those nectar feeders. So we can bring them in, and we make sure that we keep that nectar fresh. So it's starting to heat up here in the south, so you're probably going to have to change that nectar, I'd say every
few days. Yeah.
And scrub it. If you start to see any black mold on it, that feeder needs to be scrubbed very thoroughly and let to dry in the sun, and then you can add that nectar back. And then suet cakes might be something you would want to hang from your feeder for your tiny habitat, and I would especially personally do that in cold weather. Mm-hmm. It's providing a lot of protein.
And also in the spring with the young. They feed the young that. So
Laurie's got this, what is it called? Bugs and something.
Bugs and nuts.
Bugs and nuts. Yeah. And if I were a bird and I saw that, I'd be going crazy because it looks like it'd just be delicious for birds. I'm sure humans are kind of grossed out by it because you can see all the bugs that have been studied into, I'm sure it's probably beef fat.
Right.
But that's a high energy food, and it's a no mess food. So that would be another one that would help if you are, in a community where you only have a small space and they frown on anything that might create a mess or draw in pests. What would be considered by some people to be pests.
Right.
So now we've done places to raise young and food, and we're going to move on to water. So let's talk about ways to provide water.
So without a bird bath, your reservoir for pots.
Yeah.
That works. The terracotta bottom of a pot. You saw an example of that one that I sent you with my little duck sitting in that.
Yeah. Laurie has a female mallard. She put out a reservoir thinking that, I guess, birds that go to the ground to drink might love it. And instead, there's a mallard squashed herself into the whole thing.
Walked right over there and sat down in the middle of it. The plastic pots, the bottom of plastic pots work real well.
Yeah. I've never seen any discussion on whether one of those is preferable to the other. Have you? Mm-mm. Yeah, I think the big thing would be making sure they're clean and the water is fresh.
Right.
And then if you don't have either one of those, and most of us do, if we buy a plant, usually comes with that, then just get a bowl. If you've got a bowl that maybe you don't have that set anymore, and you can just grab that and put it on a deck rail or put it on the ground, that would be an easy way of providing it as well.
There's also bird baths that you can just buy the top for, which makes it really nice for your deck.
Yeah.
Or old tree stump, put it on a tree stump or something. That works real well if you can't get the whole bird bath.
Absolutely. And in fact, the tree itself, if it is hollow and holds water, that's a great resource for providing water. And then you hear me say this every time I mention this product. I usually say, this is my favorite thing. And it's still my favorite thing. And it's a Mr. Dripper. This comes with 1/4-inch tubing, and it comes with about 100 feet of it in the kit, right? 50
feet.
And it has different types of attachments, and some of them spray and some of them drip. So you could hypothetically run this up a shepherd's crook that's put in the ground or attached to a deck rail. You can just set it to spray, and the birds will go back and forth through the spray. Or you can put it on drip and put any of these things we've talked about for capturing water underneath. So the birds are hearing the drip, 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 and they're attracted by the sound of running water.
We also have it's just called a mister that I really like. I just run it up my beautyberry bush and turn that on real slow all day. It does not go through that much water, but the birds absolutely love it.
Yeah.
First, they're hidden in the beauty bush, and they're getting a bath, and they're getting water. So, we love that.
And I can tell you, there's some possibility, Laurie and I have hung out on her deck drinking wine
A couple times.
Yeah, just a couple times. And just a couple glasses of wine. And watching those birds and the joy they get from coming and going and bathing and rubbing against the leaves, it is a mecca. It's like a spa day for the birds. They're flocking to that. I did the same thing in my yard by snaking it up into a dogwood tree, and they would bathe against the leaves there, and it was right against the bird feeder, so it would also drip, or bird bath, it would drip down into the bird bath. So just a really simple device, but it gives you a big bang for your buck for your tiny habitat.
A lot of free entertaining there.
Exactly, yeah. So now we've talked about places to raise young, food, water. We're going to look at shelter or cover next.
Well, that would be bushes.
Could be, yeah.
Bushes make great coverage by anything, by bird feeders or bird baths or anything. Just it's birds look for that just from predators, and I think you get a lot more activity at your feeders and your baths when you have bushes nearby.
Oh, I agree. I always tell people, if you win a 12-course surf and turf dinner with all the wine you want, really great wine, and it's just the most beautifully prepared food ever, but it's outside at the sewage treatment plant, it's not so appealing. So the location is very important, and what makes that location suitable for the wildlife we're trying to attract is very important. So these bushes that they can dart into. I have elderberry in my yard, and it's blooming right now, and it is beautiful. I was looking out last night, and it was dark, but because the blooms are good size, I would say maybe 6 inches across, and they're white, it looked like they were glowing in the night. It was. I kept thinking, should I try out and get a picture of that? So they're fairly dense cover, and it's a great place for them to dart into cover to escape a predator. And vines can be used the same way. We think about vines as being kind of puny, I guess. Yeah. But right now there's a Carolina jasmine vine that is right by my deck stairs, and it is on I don't even know what it's on because it's overgrown it. So there's a trellis under there somewhere, but I don't remember what it looks like anymore. And we do have to trim this vine, but it's got pretty good density to it. And I realized a couple of nights ago when a bird almost flew up my nose and I almost fell down the deck stairs that we had something in it. And I looked, and sure enough, there was a cardinal in a nest in that. So a simple vine that you can appreciate put on a trellis can provide cover too.
And planters.
Yeah.
Planters will, even if they don't nest in them, they definitely will roost in them at night a lot of times.
Yep. Do you remember creating a pollinator garden with Lisa Tompkins years ago?
Yep.
Yeah. And man, it was out in front of your store.
It's huge.
Yeah. It really did provide wonderful cover. And I still have mine out in my garden. So really nicely done. And then we can't forget about ground cover. That's something I think we tend to overlook. You do not want to use something such as English ivy. We were talking about that earlier, because it may provide shelter for things you don't want to shelter, such as mosquitoes and copperheads. Yeah. But it does allow some birds to dart into it. Brush piles would do the same thing. So we can create a tiny habitat no matter where we live by just thinking about from the wildlife's perspective. How do we provide food, water, shelter, places to raise young, and use sustainable gardening practices around this? And I think if you start thinking this through, you're going to say, well, I can do that. I can put this on my patio home. I can put this on my balcony for an apartment, and you're going to get a lot of joy. Somebody sent us a picture, and they lived, I think, on a second floor of an apartment building that had a balcony, and she had hung hummingbird feeders up there. And I wasn't sure how high up they would go, but they were hitting those feeders with great regularity.
Yeah, they go high.
Yeah. So
I remember seeing them in the top of the trees on our bird walks.
Oh, yeah.
And chasing the hawk. They go up there.
Yeah, they absolutely do. We were taking a walk in Francis Beatty Park. Was it last year? And we could see just barely some tiny little thing that was coming behind a hawk. And whatever it was staying up with that hawk, and it looked like it was maybe pecking at it. when we got binoculars on, it was a hummingbird. And we did not know they would do that. But that little bird was taking it to that hawk. It meant business. I guess it wasn't worth the hawk's attention to turn around.
I guess it wasn't.
Not even a mouthful, so probably just wasn't worth its time. We hope you've enjoyed this episode about tiny houses, tiny habitats. It's a nice correlation to think about what the popular trend right now with tiny houses and how we can do that for our wildlife in our yard. I'm Debbie.
And I'm Lori.
We're the Backyard Naturalist, and we're signing out.
While recording the Backyard Naturalist podcast, Debbie and Laurie enjoy coffee provided by the Good Cup Coffee Company in Matthews, North Carolina. Follow Good Cup Coffee on Instagram and look for them at the Matthews Community Farmers Market this Saturday morning.